Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone to this meeting of the Assets and Procurement Committee here at Newshire Hall and everyone watching via YouTube. The County Council allows filming photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and that a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the County Council's website. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave by the nearest marked fire exit and assemble in the car park. The closest fire escape is through the middle doors on my left over there. Right, the first item is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies?
We have no apologies today.
Does any member wish to disclose any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? No? Okay, thank you. Then moving on to item 2, the minutes. We are being asked to approve the minutes of the committee meeting held on the 18th of November as an accurate record. If any committee member wants to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes? No. So we'll take that as carried unanimously. So we have any updates on the action log, Jenna?
We do, thank you, Chair. We have updates on items 11A and 11B regarding the valuation and land ownership details of the site for disposal of land at Neil Wade Academy, which this information has been provided to members on the 9th of January, so these are now complete, as well as, as well as items on 21A and 21B on matters relating to the commercial investment property portfolio item. The requested information on lease and tenancy was shared with members yesterday on the 12th of January, so these are also now complete.
Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, so we are therefore asked to note the action log. Item 3 is petitions and public questions, and we don't have any. So we're moving on now to the first item, which is the shared service ERP print procurement. May I remind members that the appendix to this report is exempt, and we will need to move into confidential session if members wish to discuss it. I think we probably manage without doing that, but you let me know. Can I ask Tom Kelly, Service Director, Finance and Procurement, and Peter Borley-Cox, Head of Enterprise Applications at North West Hamptonshire Council, to present this report, which is on page 19 of your agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the committee. The committee will be familiar that ERP Gold is one of the Council's key systems. It provides our financial management software, payroll system, and is used in procurement as well. It's shared with 3 other principal councils, including West Northamptonshire Council, who host this particular contract, North Northamptonshire Council, and Milton Keynes City Council. Through the lead authority model, and this report is about the print and postage solution that is integrated with ERP Gold. The system is a pay-as-you-use system, and we are continuously looking as a council at ways of reducing our print and postage expenditure. So, for instance, in the accounts receivable space across the last 2 years, we've seen a 12 percentage point reduction in the amount of printing we do as we move more clients onto direct debit and other kind of more digital solutions. We've had similar success in the payroll team at reducing the number of paper pay slips. Through this report, we are recommending a compliant route to re-procure the existing supplier, and we set out the various factors, including technical integration and cost considerations, cost comparison information that supports that recommendation.
Sorry, Tom, can you bring the mic a bit closer to you? You're very, very quiet. Thank you. Sorry.
And so, yes, I'll just repeat the recommendation. Through this report, we recommend a compliant route to re-procure the existing supplier. We set out the factors that lead to that, including the technical integration and the cost comparison process that we've been through that leads to that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Sorry. Thank you to Peter for coming all this way. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and a Happy New Year to you. I've got a number of questions, potentially, depending upon the answers I receive. I am a little bit uncertain about what this contract means, and it comes back to what Tom was talking about on paragraph 6.1.2, about the contract being delivered on a pay-as-you-use basis with no minimum spend requirement. There's a number of different ways of interpreting that. Am I correct in interpreting it in saying that we don't actually, even if we enter into this contract, we don't need to use them at all? We could use someone else, pay them nothing at all for the period of the contract.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Okay. In which case, what puzzled me, and again, I'd be just grateful if there was some confirmation of this, and if it needs to be confirmation outside the meeting, then so be it. What puzzled me was in paragraph 3.4, where it says that with local government reorganisation, because this contract will go beyond the 31st of March 2028, which is when we believe local government reorganisation will take place, successor councils can choose to novate this contract. Now, my understanding was that any contracts which have been entered into by an authority, it's not a case of the successful authorities choosing to novate, it will automatically be novated. Now, I was very surprised to see that phrase choosing to novate. Is that technically correct?
Councillor Bowden, I think you pick up a valid point about the wording there. So that yes, you're right. I think the contract will novate, and then it's up to successor councils, as indeed it is up to this council to choose the extent to which it uses that contract. But it will be an ongoing contract.
Thank you. I think, Chair, it's rather important that that point is noted for the minutes, that it's not a case of there being a choice of novation. The novation will happen automatically.
Indeed. Anyone? Councillor Hawker-Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. So just seeking a bit of clarification, please. So in the table on 6.1.2, there are calculations of the 4-year costs, and it states that that assumes essentially a one-off postage cost increase of 7.5%. Can we be sure that that increase will only be one-off? Is that the kind of increase that PSL have full control over, or is it subject to external forces such as, I don't know, some form of Royal Mail variations?
That's certainly true, Councillor. The reason why we included the 7.5% one-off increase is because it is known, so it's certain. We've been notified that ahead of time, and it will be included in the contract. But as you correctly say, in the life of this contract and with the market indications, there are likely to be other increases. However, it's very difficult to actually forecast what those might be. So we took the approach of including the known increase and then not attempting to forecast the market. But yes, there will certainly be, the contract is subject to market fluctuations and the cost of postage in particular. And that is the largest element of the cost, is postage, not actually the printing itself. And the council's objective of reducing the volumes, that's part of the driver for that.
Anyone? Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair, and Happy New Year to all. So, in regards to the contract, can we confirm what benchmarking or call-off competition has been undertaken, sort of within the framework, to show that this direct award gives the lowest possible price available for the volumes that we anticipate?
So to enter the framework contract themselves, the suppliers undergo a framework assessment and part of a process to actually join the framework. So we've undertaken an assessment based on quality and price. So the current provider has come out top in quality, and they are third out of 5 based on the price card analysis that we've done against the framework providers. So it's not the cheapest. However, when you take into account the cost of change were we to change providers, that then introduces a significant additional one-off cost. So just as an example, so we've estimated the cost of change at £370,000, and that's based on our previous experience of when we changed to this contract. There is also then a period of time it takes as well. So there's also a business cost and an opportunity cost, which in balance, in our view, makes the direct award to the incumbent provider cheaper as a whole, not just on the not just on the unit cost of the printing and postage.
Thank you. Satisfied with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, anyone? Councillor Haythorne.
Happy New Year, everyone, as well. Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One is about, like, we say quality a lot, but could you sort of elaborate what quality is meant, and is reliability, is reliability part of that quality score? And secondly, it's a comment about the confidential appendix, but not about the confidential element. So it's basically a price chart, so we as members get to see the the competition within the market. But I found it really difficult to get my head around it, because there was just lots of numbers. I went back to officers and got a color coded version, so I could see. That was really helpful, because I could see then which was the highest and lowest quote. And also it was also really hard to understand, because I couldn't see the kind of quantities of the different services that we're using. So I think it would be helpful when we're being given price information to be able to really understand it and look at it and interrogate it in a way that is a bit more that is quicker to look at, especially as we get a PDF, so you can't just plug it into Excel and ask it to do stuff. You're kind of just looking at it and having to process it on a screen. But yeah, so questions about like how future papers can be laid out, and about what quality is meant by quality.
Thank you. So quality addresses a number of things, as you say. Reliability is certainly one of them. So our requirements for printing and dispatch are actually quite complex, as you might imagine, and particularly across a number of partner organisations, they become a little bit more complex as well as part of that. So part of the quality was about the flexibility of the contract, so that we don't literally send them a file and they just print and post all of it and then charge us once. We have a requirement to understand a breakdown of what's been printed and posted. Some of it, for example, is returned to the council. So we ask them to dispatch it back to us, and then we will organise its onward distribution. And then that means it's cheaper for us, for example, where we might have a difficult to reach workforce, but instead of posting a payslip to their home, we might gather them together and then dispatch them to a place of work for onward distribution. So that's actually quite a complicated requirement not for us, it's kind of really logical, but in the market that actually makes it not that simple a process. So there's something about the flexibility of the service. Reliability is a very important thing for us. How long it takes to get the item dispatched after it's distributed to them. So we've got a very strict SLA that we get the file to them at a certain time in the early hours of the morning. It's then printed and dispatched the same day. So it's those kind of considerations that apply to quality. Thank you for the feedback on the confidential appendix. I apologise. Really, I don't think it was necessarily as helpful as we thought it was going to be. So I'm sorry, that was a misjudgment on our part. It is really very difficult. And obviously, we've had a business analyst actually working on these numbers for some time. So thank you. We will certainly think about how better to present that. And my summary of actually what it means is out of 5 suppliers, they come third in cost is probably what we should have just explained rather than try to present you the detailed evidence. So, but thank you for the feedback. We'll certainly take that on board for next time.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. So the report highlights the opportunity to reduce print and move to digital channels. But what I don't see is in the report is a trajectory or target. Is there an expected percentage reduction in print volumes over the 4-year term? And what is the estimated cash saving that we're expected for the taxpayers?
Yes, we haven't included a specific target. So we've got some initiatives underway. So, for example, Tom mentioned in accounts receivable, in particular, and adult social care is a large driver of that. We're currently piloting some reductions in print by the use of text messaging, for example. But that is very early days, and so we don't think it's appropriate to provide a very fixed target. We're very focused on cost savings, as you can imagine, across the council. We take as part of the budget planning cycle, we take that very seriously to look at every single option we have. It's really that I don't feel that we can be committed. We've got ongoing actions, and we've certainly seen success in reducing our print volumes, but we haven't assessed that. Part of this paper is really about the procurement of the contract, so it's not necessarily directly relevant to this decision that's being made, although we totally appreciate the point, and we will be including that in budget setting processes ongoing, as in fact we did have that very discussion in this year's budget setting process, and we've taken some savings as a result.
Thank you. I just have one more question, Chair, if possible. Does the contract require any specific social value or net zero commitments from the supplier and that have any cost implications?
It doesn't, no. There's a section on social value opportunities at the end in 661. We've had a discussion with the supplier about their willingness to explore opportunities to deliver that value. So that's not reflected in the contract, and in fact they're bound by the terms of the framework agreement. And that slightly leads into the. I did notice some of the wording. It sounds very vague about their commitment to do that, and that is part of the discussion that we're having with them. But they have made a commitment to explore the Match My Project opportunities, for example. But no, there's, as far as we're concerned, the prices are fixed in the framework contract, and so there is no additional cost of anything that we negotiate with the supplier to provide additional social value.
Thank you. That assurance is helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any more questions? I think we've had a very thorough discussion. So thank you again for coming. Let's move to the recommendations. So A, approve procurement for the ERP print service using the Procurement for Housing Framework, Lot 3, print, mailing and digital communications to pursue a direct award. And B, delegate authority for awarding and executing a contract for the provision of ERP print starting 1st of May 2026 for the period of 3 years and 1-year extension periods to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, and in turn to Northamptonshire Council in accordance with the Shared Services Agreement. Any objections? No? Right, so we'll take that as carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Right, so we are now going to move on to item 5, property disposal of Signet Court in Cambridge. Again, I remind you that the appendix to this report is exempt, and we will need to move into confidential session if members wish to discuss it. Can I ask Mark Freer, Principal Surveyor, and Chris Ramsbottom, Service Director, Property Services, to present this report, which is on page 31 of your agenda pack.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. I also have Mark Freer alongside me, who is one of our chartered surveyors and the case officer for this disposal. This report considers the freehold disposal of 18 to 20 Signet Court, Cambridge, which is a Cambridge County Council office building. The Council's disposal policy requires committee approval for the disposal of land or property where the consideration received is greater than 750,000, which this is, hence why we bring to committee today. The details of the property are covered within items 2.1 and 2.2 of the report. Item 2.3 informs that following an asset challenge and office portfolio review, this office building was itemised within the committee-approved initial accommodation improvement programme as a building we wish to dispose of, and it now forms part of the overall asset change programme. Existing colleagues who were contractually based at Signet Court were consulted with in line with the Council's HR policy between the 16th of July and the 30th of August, with the details of their new contractual basis shown within the table within 2.3, and that became effective and they were all relocated by the 1st of October 2025. In line with the Council's disposal policy, the building was offered to both This Land Limited and Cambridge City Council, who both declined this preemptive option, and therefore, following the procurement of an agent, we commenced open marketing of the property at the end of October. It was marketed for an 8-week period with a small number of viewings, and the marketing included a targeted outreach to potential buyers. 2.4 confirms we followed the Council member engagement protocol by informing the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee and the local ward member of the intention to market. Our selling agent, who has provided their opinion in writing, our own chartered surveyor and our legal colleagues all confirm that the bid we received reflects and meets the Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 in terms of best consideration requirements. The purchaser intends to convert the property to residential use under permitted development rights. However, this is not a condition of the sale. We include with the main paper, due to the content of commerciality, 2 confidential appendices: the head of terms document, which includes purchaser identity and financial arrangements, a timetable for exchange and completion, as well as due financial diligence of the purchaser. Approval today will generate a substantial capital receipt for the Council, reduce ongoing property costs, including maintenance, utilities and business rate liabilities, and support the Council's business and budget plan, where the revenue savings and capital receipts for this building are included. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions, anyone? Councillor Ioannidis, then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. The report notes that the agreed sale price is slightly below the amount assumed in the business plan and budget. Can I ask by how much is it below in percentage and cash terms? And were there any changes in the market conditions, occupancy or condition, the key drivers?
Yes, I think the original asking price was 895,000, and the offer.
Just a minute. Are we happy to be?
I'll pick this up, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
The amount that we're talking about in terms of the sale price is in the confidential heads of terms, which we can't go into in detail. However, the percentage is very low, and that's why we were able to come to this conclusion that it meets the Section 123 as discussed in my opening comments. So it's very close to the actual budget and guide price.
Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair, and Happy New Year to everybody. Yes, so I note that this property has been on the market for just over 3 months. The documents make reference to this one offer only, and I assume from that there hasn't been any other offers. But the bit that I would like to see is the fact that we don't seem to have any reference to valuation, either a valuation report or who indeed did the valuation. Could you expand upon that, please?
Apologies for my earlier comments, but yeah, there isn't a formal valuation. The council's disposal policy is where we offer a property to the market. An independent valuation isn't required before then. The marketing activity provides the test of what is market value. In this instance, you're right. We only had one offer. There were a handful of interested parties, but only one party put forward an actual offer. And in accordance with the Local Government Act and our best consideration requirements, our policy then says that we need to get the agent to write a letter confirming that, in their opinion, that they're confident that the offer received and that's accepted represents best consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Fisher. Beg your pardon. Councillor Ioannidis.
That's okay, Chair. Thank you. Can we get confirmation that the independent valuer has certified this as the best consideration reasonably attainable at the time of sale, and that the gap on the business plan assumption will not create any additional pressure on the capital programme? Just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Yes, we can provide a copy of the letter from the independent valuer to the councillors.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. I'm very happy that the council is disposing of excess assets, and therefore I'm happy with the sale. For further understanding, this is being sold with the assumption that permitted development rights will be very easy to obtain for it. Is this a step that the developers are very likely to be able to? Are these permitted development rights very likely for them to be able to achieve? And in what circumstances in the future, when we're selling these properties, would it be more prudent for us to get the permitted development to get the development or planning permission beforehand for these developments, and how often is that beneficial versus selling without the planning permission? I understand in this case it's probably very easy to get the planning permission to do the conversion, but are they the things that you consider when you sell the properties, given that we're selling a lot of these office properties going forwards?
Yes, that is something we consider. Opportunities where, before going to market, if there's an opportunity where we can put in a planning application to improve values, we will always do that and consider that. In this particular case, the permitted development rights are there, and there's a prior approval process which involves an application, but I wouldn't say it's guaranteed, but there has to be certain considerations, such if the property was in a conservation area, was listed, or had other issues. But in this case, it doesn't meet any of those thresholds. So the assumption is it would receive the rights to then convert to residential, and we were aware of that before we went to market, and we had, offered it out to a variety of different users. There was no restrictions. So yeah, it is something we consider.
Thank you.
Councillor Hathorn.
I mean, so this is more a debate item than a question, but I think this seems very sensible. There is a slight variation between the price we thought we might have got and the purchase price, but it's very small. There's a real cost to holding on to buildings you don't need. There is a cost to looking after buildings which are running at very low occupancy, which is what this was. I think it's a really sensible thing we're doing, disposing of underused and unused property assets. The property market, both for a county council and for an individual is not straightforward. You might get a buyer and then the thing falls through. It goes on, and we see exactly what happens with personal house purchases happening at the county council. So this seems very sensible. We've got a buyer. Cambridge needs more housing, so great that that's a proposal, and I'm really in support of this.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with Councillor Hathorn's view on the matter. Totally agree. However, can I just ask, can we get confirmation that the net receipt from this sale then is going to be used primarily to reduce prudential borrowing and support statutory services and not diverted to any discretionary or ideological projects?
I think that's for you, Michael.
Chair, I can confirm that that is the intention, as in they don't repay borrowing.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I welcome that.
Well, I would add to that, though, that money is fungible. So, I mean, you can't say that anyway. But we will be reducing borrowing with this money. But I mean, yeah. Anyway, any other questions on this? Right. So, let's move to the recommendation. The Assets and Procurement Committee is invited to delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance and Resources in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Assets and Procurement Committee to agree any outstanding terms, to approve the execution of all necessary documentation, and to complete the disposal of the property. Are we all in agreement? Yep, great. So we will take that as carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so then moving on to item 6. This is the refresh of the land and property strategy. Can I ask Chris Ramsbottom, Services Director, Property Services, to present this report, which is on page 41 of your agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. This report brings to committee to consider and approve a refresh of the Land and Property Strategy 2024-29, which was approved at Assets and Procurement Committee on the 21st of March 2024. With the strategy now being in place for 19 months, we wish to refresh the strategy for a number of reasons, notably to provide an update to existing and newer members of the committee of the approved Land and Property Strategy and reinforce the awareness of it, to ensure that the content and direction set within the strategy in 2024 is still relevant and continues to align with the Council's strategic framework, to highlight to members the progress made against the actions within the delivery plan, which is an appendix within the strategy document, and the actions are covered within items 2.4 and 2.5 of the actual report. To acknowledge and reference the impact of local government reorganisation in our future thinking and decision making, and take account of changes to other supporting council strategies, notably the new strategic framework and the new climate change and environment strategy, both of which are also due to be approved at relevant committees in January. We are confident that the previously approved core principles of the strategy are still aligned to the Council's existing and proposed new strategic framework, and as such the changes to the strategy document are minimal in their strategic direction, whilst taking account of potential impacts of LGR guidance. Item 2.6 of the report covers the general improvements made within the property service as a result of the guiding direction of the strategy. Included within the papers as an appendix to the main report is the refreshed Land and Property Strategy document with all changes tracked and highlighted for transparency and ease of the reader. The original actions within the delivery plan are commented on regarding progress, as well as the new actions which focuses direction going forward over the next 2 years. The recommendation is for committee to consider and approve the refreshed version of the Land and Property Strategy, which was, as I said earlier, previously approved in committee in March 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I read through this with great interest, and I know it's going to be coming to strategy and resources and performance later. When it does come to strategy and performance and reports and performance later, perhaps references to Greater Cambridgeshire could be removed and replaced with Greater Cambridge, which is what we should be talking about, as you'll see on page 27 in the appendix. That wasn't my main problem, though. Again, a lot of what we are going to be doing now, increasingly over the remaining 2 years and a couple of months that we are likely to exist, will need to be done with reflection on the impact of LGR and local government reorganisation. And we don't know yet, of course, what the government will impose upon us in terms of the pattern of new unitaries, which makes it particularly difficult. But it's quite appropriate, as is mentioned in this report, to start now in identifying that there are issues which will need to be addressed. However, in Action 8, I'm concerned that we are continuing to be too parochial. In Action 8, it states that there is a need now to consider the impact of this in decisions we make, and dialogue with the existing district councils is essential. Whilst that's certainly true, it's also essential to have dialogue with Peterborough City Council, because some parts of this county, and we don't know which parts yet, but some parts of this county are going to be unfortunate enough to be linked with Peterborough City Council in a new unitary authority. It may apply to all or part of Huntingdonshire, it may apply to all of East Cambs, it may apply to all of Fenland, we don't know yet. But the point is that when considering the assets that we've got and what we need to improve and what we need to retain, we will need, after we know what the new unitaries are, we will need to be aware of what Peterborough has as well, so that we can make sure that we neither have redundancy, too much of a particular asset, nor a lack of a particular asset that is required. So may I suggest, Chair, that again, when this comes up before strategy, resources and performance, the Peterborough City Council is included, as well as the existing district councils in Action 8.
I think that sounds sensible. I don't think there's any intention to exclude anyone. So, yeah, sure, that can be fine. Any other questions or points to make? Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. The refresh strategy explicitly commits the council to embedding carbon net zero principles and decarbonising our estates, including county farms and operational buildings. What's the estimated capital revenue cost for these commitments over the life of the strategy, and what are the payback periods?
I don't have those details with me. However, the future over the next 2 years in terms of that net zero commitment on our building portfolio will be aligned with the new climate and environmental strategy that's going through the committee. So the format in terms of the future planned investment in our properties is going to be aligned to that. The details of the work we've done so far is included. However, the future of the buildings going forward will be aligned with the asset review, etc., etc. So I don't have those figures with me at this point in time.
Thank you. In regards to that, then, I don't see how I can sign off, my approval on what's effectively a blank check for net zero. Will we be able to bring back any fully costed option papers, including minimum compliance versus the net zero maximising scenarios, so we can judge whether the proposed works are affordable and proportionate?
We will obviously be putting a programme forward. Historically, over the past few years, we've carried out investment in our property portfolio in terms of that through Salix funding. So we will still be applying for funding to support that piece of work. Alongside that, part of the strategy we're looking at is bringing forward a new strategy for the rural estate. And obviously part of the carbon emissions, a large part of our council's carbon emissions are within that rural estate, and that'll be form part of the strategy we're bringing forward, particularly for the rural estate.
Thank you.
Any questions from anyone else? Councillor Fisher and Councillor Hathorn.
Thank you. Yeah, just going back to your previous comment on the farms estate. So potentially with this refreshed strategy, it could arguably increase obligations for climate and net zero obligations to the county farms tenants.
That's part of the plan we're working on. We've got the baseline for data for the farms estate, and we're working to put a programme together in terms of what that means in terms of the investment required to make inroads into that carbon. Some of that will be council, some of that may be tenant, but that's still to be worked through.
Councillor Hathorn.
Thank you. So yeah, I've got 3 questions. So one is page 78, the community asset transfer policy. In principle, that sounds wonderful, but I think with Mill Road Library, for example, we see a building with a listing on the exterior and a building which is also frankly a money pit. So I guess in the community asset transfer policy, it needs to sort of balance that, like there will be sort of environmental considerations or historical environmental considerations, and that's got to be reflected. So I guess that's a comment. So it just a little bit soft, but recognizing that, bearing in mind the difficulty we find with some property disposals, but bearing in mind there's a policy coming, I guess that's a comment. In terms of the farms estate, yes, innovation sounds good. Renewable opportunities sound good, but as part of the County Farms Working Group, we were lucky enough to go on a farm visit, and the farmer very generously showed us his accounts, and it is really hard for farmers to make ends meet. So as part of this process of locating renewable opportunities on our tenant farmland, like, are the farmers going to benefit financially? Maybe not the entire, but like, what is the financial models? We've got to make sure our farmers can still afford to grow the food that we need, and that they can afford to live a decent quality of life, which I think they're really struggling at the moment. And third question, who sits on the asset programme board? And fourth comment, Councillor Bowden was talking about Action 8. I think it's, which confused me, I think it's Action 20, but I feel a bit confused whether the reference I could see to district councils was on Action 20.
I'll try and pick those up in order that they were asked. I think your comments around the rural estate and the tenants are very valid. The carbon issue there is going to be a difficult one to work forward, because obviously the farmers are in effect a business, so there has to be that business sustainability associated with that. So that's the point of going forward and working with them to diversify and help that process, but it is not going to be a quick win. So we accept that, and that's part of the process going forward. The second point, or third point, around the board, that's chaired currently by Frank Jordan as exec director. That'll obviously change shortly when Frank departs, but that is a board, and one of the change board 5 boards was within the change of the council. So that's high level, with high level attendees across the council's full spectrum of service areas to get that rounded discussion. And just remind me of the second point, Councillor Hathorn, if you could.
It was about the community asset transfer.
Yes, sorry. The community asset transfer is something that we currently have a guidance document on, but no real clear, transparent, consistent way of carrying out those. So if we were to get a community group that met the criteria coming forward, the idea of putting a policy together now is that we get a transparent, consistent way of evaluating their bid, and all the comments you made around what needs to be involved will be part of that process in terms of initial evaluation of a scoping, etc., etc. So that will come forward to make it fair and consistent across the council in terms of any bids that we would get going forward.
Thank you. So Councillor Bowden, then Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to avoid any uncertainty, and thank you, Councillor Hathorn, for listening to what I was saying, at least. But I was specifically relating to Action 8, as is shown on page 3 of the main report, where the final sentence says the local government reorganisation impact will be clearer as a decision is made on the unitary authorities. However, there is a need now to consider the impact of this in decisions we make, and dialogue with the existing district councils is essential. So it was that I was particularly referring to, and I just wanted to emphasise it because it is something I would like to see changed when we do see this come forward to strategy, resources and performance. Thank you.
And if I could quickly come back, I was looking at the actions log within the other document, hence my confusion.
Okay, glad we could tidy that up. Councillor Murphy.
It's really just a comment about the costs of net zero, which are constantly being referred to. There is a cost to achieving sustainability, and it's got to be balanced against the cost of not doing so, which are catastrophic and indeed even existential. It's really important, just even as a council, our costs are really rocketing because of the effects of climate change, increased flooding, damage to our roads, and so on. So we have to see the picture in the round, is my sort of observation, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Murphy. And I would add to that, it also reduces our costs. I mean, if you insulate a building, our heating bills go down. So that's also a very material consideration, so a very hard-headed financial one. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. First to note that on the strategic delivery plan, which is Appendix B, I'm happy to see that the on number 6, that review disposal and acquisition has now been changed to review disposal policy, and that it seems that we're moving more to a process of disposing of assets. May I confirm that that includes the investment portfolio? The other thing was to talk about the farmland strategy again, and what input, or when will be the input stage for members of this committee, or will it would be to mainly to the environmental and investment committee, and when will we be able to review that and suggest any changes? When do you believe that that will be published to members of this committee?
I mean, just to answer your first point, yes, it does include for the investment portfolio. We're currently working on a timescale for the for the County Farms Estate strategy to bring to this committee in June. So we're working on that as we speak, to bring through the normal spokes process, etc., to come to this committee in June.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Michael would like to say something.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, just through you, I just wanted to clarify a few points, and without losing the point that Councillor Bowden and Councillor Hathorn has raised. Councillor Bowden is absolutely correct in what he said in terms of Action 8 within the text of the report, reflecting the actions that were in the original strategy and have now been reported upon. Councillor Hathorn is also correct in terms of Action 20 is the new action going forward, and Action 20 does reference the need to have dialogue with the unitaries as well as the district. So Action 20 on page 87 of the committee papers does pick up and complete that. And then just going back to a point that a number of councillors have flagged, just to confirm that no decision around any of our estate related to its improvement, related to, for example, the carbon agenda, be it the Grafton Water Centre or our rural estate, would be taken without needed for funding and balancing, and therefore, given the scale of some of that, would most likely come back through the committee anyway.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Gardner, then Councillor Nandi.
Thank you very much, Chair, and Happy New Year to you all. I was just concerned there with regard to the comment with regard to Grafton Water Centre. So well, as the local member, I would be interested in knowing what the comment was referring to. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I had thousands of assets to pick, and I had to pick that one. I merely make out the point that that is one of our assets that we hold. It does have an old boiler system, window systems, and as part of consideration of any of the upgrade, we'll clearly be considering, as we would with any of our buildings. So I merely used it as an example, the fact that there would be investment needed to make it a more carbon efficient building, and therefore that decision would be brought through given the scale of the likelihood of that building. If we look at number 42 on Castle Street by Old Shire Hall, that building very, very small. You know, I can't estimate, you know, how much that would cost, but it would be below the threshold within delegation. I would expect somewhere like Gratham would be outside of my delegation and would come to committee, and that's the only reason that I use it.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just comment that I absolutely support having clear, data-driven land property strategy. We want the council to know exactly what it owns, to rationalise surplus buildings, and to generate capital receipts and to cut running costs. Those parts of the strategy I think are sensible, and I welcome them. But this refreshed document before us today is not just an operational estate plan. It is explicitly realigned to a political vision of a greener, fairer, more caring Cambridgeshire, and to the council's net zero ambitions. It will commit us to embedding carbon net zero principles across all land and property decisions, to decarbonising buildings, and to reshaping the county farms estates for climate objectives. But what we don't have is a clear quantified costings or payback analysis. I'd like to make my position clear. I don't want to sign up to blank checks for net zero, but I support sensible, cost-effective environmental measures, but I can't endorse open-ended climate obligations that can quietly inflate capital programs and operating costs for years to come. The finance section in the report here says that there is no direct financial implications at this stage, yet the narrative anticipates significant decarbonisation works with land use interventions. That contradiction should worry every councillor who cares about honest budgeting. So I think my position would be straightforward. I think we need to bring back a version of this strategy that separates the necessary estate management work, disposals, rationalisation and corporate landlord functions from the optional climate and political narratives. Thank you.
Okay. Michael, perhaps you can comment.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Clearly, the agenda around climate change and carbon reduction has been set out by the Council. There is a refreshed strategic framework that doesn't change any of that direction, and officers work towards that strategic framework. What the strategy therefore does is it reflects that agenda. It is a strategy and therefore is setting out the vision and direction under which decisions are then to be taken. As I referred to earlier, therefore, the reason the financial comments say that this has no direct implication is because it is purely that a framework within which officers then operate to ensure that the direction of council is that then that is delivered on the ground. As I referred to earlier, any decisions, therefore, that will need to be taken will need to be brought through. They'll need to be funded. That could be in a number of ways. It could be in a rationalisation of the estate. It could be in an increase in fees. It could come from grant funding. But part of the corporate property team, in relation to their role as corporate landlord, working with the climate change team and working with the service team, is to find solutions that are fully costed, be that on a payback basis or from grant funding, whichever means that is, and that will be taken on an individual basis. The strategy just purely sets the framework under which they will operate.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. So Michael's just taken some of the words out of my mouth, but this is more debate than question. But we keep hearing about this sort of climate strategy and this political agenda. I mean, if a political agenda is believing science and believing fact and reason, then I'm quite happy with that political agenda. If we look at the estate that we have in Cambridgeshire, some of it is very old, some of it needs upgrading, both to tackle climate change, which, as has been highlighted, is an existential threat to us. Some of the extreme weather we've seen just this year really does highlight that, and that we are only at the start of it. But it also makes many of our properties more efficient. If we, as Councillor Young suggested, if we insulate buildings, that reduces heating costs. There are financial opportunities in the rural estate as well as challenges. And as Michael said, this strategy is a strategy. It's not committing anyone to any particular spend. They still have to go through the proper channels and the proper approvals, but it sets a strategy for officers to work to. And if we are going to have an evidence-based council, then we have to follow the science, and therefore I'm very happy to support this strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Machini.
Thank you. Very, very final comments. Number one, I think at the risk of teaching people how to suck eggs, and I apologize in advance if I'm doing that, if you see a strategy document that you don't like the content of, you don't have to vote for it. At the same time, the only time I would argue ever when the council commits to any kind of expenditure is a budget time, and that's coming up. And every single councillor will have the opportunity to take their own spreadsheet forward with, if there is any climate-related expenditure they don't like, they take it out, they put it somewhere else. That's our job. And the budget that we're going to approve is not just for next year, it covers the whole MTFS. So you're going to see those costs, not just the ones that we anticipate next year, but the ones over the next 5. So that will be very useful, and I invite everyone to look at that, where the numbers actually are. In terms of the property strategy itself, I'm quite happy with it. What I would like to see, and it's probably too early now, but I would like to see a bit more of an indication as to how we're going to use it in the transition period, because this is being written so that it supports the transition during LGR, so that we can do all those discussions, what does this council have, what does Peterborough have, what does, et cetera, et cetera. I suspect that discussion is going to be more complicated than anybody anticipates in terms of, what is how are these documents that every council has regarding their own property, how are they going to come together when we know vaguely what the boundaries are going to be? And as soon as this thing is taking shape, I would really like to see it, because I think we are going to need quite a lot of input into how our officers are going to meet each other and start discussing who gets this house and who gets the first floor and who gets the second floor, if you see what I mean. And I wish that was all. So a bit more focus on that would have been good, or will be good when we're ready. Other than that, that's fine.
I think you make a very good point. I shudder to think about the negotiations that are coming along, and apparently we're getting guidelines rather than help from central government. So I think you make a very good point. I think we can be bringing, well, we will be bringing everything that is of any substance back to this committee. So, Michael.
I think the only thing to add, Chair, in recommendation 20 says that, there'll be a lot of data sharing, a lot of discussions will go on behind the scenes. But clearly, once we're aware of the outcome and we move to the shadow authorities, at that point, there will be a different arrangement with the shadow authorities and decisions over assets at that point. In one sense, it is a simple line drawn geographically and where assets sit. However, clearly it's not that simple when you've got services that have operated, such as social care, out of various buildings, given the geographical nature of some of our rurality and what that means for people travelling. So there will be things to work through, but I would just say the shadow authority will take a role in theory from the 1st of April 2027.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Councillor Bowden.
My apologies, Chair. Just the comment Michael just made about 1st of April 27, would it not be from the beginning of May 27 after the shadow elections take place rather than 1st of April?
Yes, in terms of then the appointments, yes.
Good point. Right. So the report recommendations are: the Assets and Procurement Committee is recommended to consider and approve the refreshed and amended Land and Property Strategy 2024 to 2029, which takes account of impacts of local government reorganisation along with its accompanying delivery action plan, which includes new actions. I think we've heard some dissent, so perhaps we'll go for a vote. All those in favour, please. And those against? I think that's everyone. So we don't have any abstentions. Yep. Okay, so that's carried. Right, now we'll move on to item 7, which is the Procurement Compliance Report. Can I ask Tom Kelly, Service Director, Finance and Procurement, to present this report, which is on page 89 of your agenda pack?
Chair, this is the regular report on procurement compliance. The committee will be pleased to see that the number of breaches has decreased since previous reports. We have 2 breaches reported for the period here. They're shown on page 83. One is relatively low value and specialist, but I know the committee will be concerned by the second one in the rural estate part of this committee's wider remit. This was detected through the additional controls and transparency that the council currently has in place in response to its financial position. The report explains the remedial action that's been taken since that breach was detected, putting the current expenditure onto a compliant framework, and preparations are underway to have a more long-term sustainable solution for how that work is procured going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any comments or questions? Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Bowden, and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. The rural estate breach shows 854,946 spend, with the 787,208 non-compliant. Can officers spell out in simple terms how this was allowed to build up? Was it a lack of oversight, a misunderstanding of thresholds, or was it a deliberate pattern of using small orders to avoid the procurement rules?
Chair, what I can confirm is that, first of all, the monitoring that we introduced about 18 months ago was what identified this. What was happening is, as you can imagine, given the size of our estate, a number of the works were procurements of between 5 and 30,000, and therefore what the officers were doing is they were tendering correctly within our procurement processes. However, what they weren't doing was then recording that in terms of its aggregate value and identifying that over set period the value of that works to the contractors that were successful was in breach of our overall limits. So it was not willful, it was not fraudulent or neglectful. It was just an absence of that check around the aggregation, which, when we introduced the monitoring controls, brought that up. And as Thomas set out, as soon as that was identified, a procured term contract was put in place, and officers are going through a contract position, which will come back to this committee for the decision to be taken.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Very few members of this committee will be aware that this is an issue which I have been taking up for longer even than the Executive Director for Finance and Resources has been in office, in position. And it's something which had been a very, very poor part of the governance of this council. The difference between where we were, let us say, 8 years ago and where we are now is absolutely massive. And with all due respect, most members of this council just won't be of this committee won't be aware of that because you didn't see how bad things were as far back as 8 years ago. So I'm really pleased with the progress which has been made. However, I'm sure that the Executive Director for Finance and Resources will join with me in being a little bit concerned that we've had a blip in terms of the value of the procurement compliance failures. And of course, when you've got relatively small numbers of individual items involved, and we always used to do it, Chair, by numbers rather than by value, which was a major mistake in the past, and that's something which was rectified during the course of the last few years. And now when we look at this value, we see this unfortunate blip, which has been caused by one particular systemic failure. Does the Executive Director for Finance and Resources have confidence that in the next quarter and the quarter following, we will see a reduction in the total value of the procurement compliance failures that are reported to this committee?
So the first thing through you, Chair, is to recognise that Councillor Bowden is absolutely correct in terms of former external auditors, bar two, BDO identified this as a significant issue in their value for money works about 8 years ago, and action has been taken ever since to bring forward improvements. I should say that the figures that was reported there is over several years. It is not of a recent nature. So I would have to get the exact period that this covers, but it does cover several years. And therefore, what we're picking up is legacy issues within this. I am privy to the outline Q3 data, which does suggest that we are picking up a few more breaches. I'm not yet sure on the value of that. What tends to happen and what we've seen is exactly the situation that's reported here for the rural estate, is we have officers working in good faith, following the procurement rules, particularly between 5 and 30,000, and letting work within, say, a year, and then following up and letting similar work in the year, and not realizing that that aggregate is what should be considered in terms of whether at the time we would have looked at a contract over 3 years or something of that ilk, which would have then triggered. And I believe that the one that we may be bringing forward for the next quarter may be of a similar issue as well. So I think we've identified a specific issue. It is a requirement in terms of the essential training that officers have to go through, or contract managers have to go through. We are also currently ensuring that all the contract registers are up to date. And as I say, the monitoring of that spend is what is throwing these up. We are transparent in the reporting that we do. We did have a question 2 or 3 committees ago about what are others doing, and when we did a trail, I think we only found 2 other councils that are reporting similar sorts of work or breaches. So we are, and from my experience over many councils over many years, this is not unique. This does happen, but we are transparent in the way that we report this.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Bowden.
I'm very grateful for the very full and comprehensive response from the Executive Director for Finance and Resources. I take it from that the answer to my question is no, that the Executive Director is not confident that we will necessarily have a reduction in the quantum which is reported to this committee.
Chair, if I may just come back, because I've had it confirmed it was April 23 to the present quarter, the end of Q2, that the figure that you see before you was for the rural estate. And at this stage, I wouldn't like to put my neck out given the information that I've seen.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Morgan.
I would just like to ask about how we're designing the procurement systems going forwards to make sure that small independent contractors are still allowed to bid if we're in this situation where these contracts need to be rolled into one larger set of contracts, sort of if you're saying that they get aggregated together and then go out to market. then there might be a situation in which smaller contractors could do parts of that possibly more effectively and cheaper, but wouldn't necessarily be able to bid for all of the work. So I just wanted to have an understanding of how our procurement system works for sort of smaller individual contracts and how we protect individual players and make sure that that not everything just goes to large players.
Yeah, through you again, Chair. I'm not sure if Tom wants to comment. Unfortunately, our head of procurement and commercial couldn't be with us today, who may want to provide a further response to mine. Absolutely, one of the things when we look at the rural estate is there is quite a niche market in some of the maintenance and the work that is carried out that would not necessarily exist within some of the larger organizations. Therefore, as we're thinking about the tender documentation, we often run days in terms of with bidders. We have events where we're looking to both introduce but also talk to bidders about how that might be structured to work with them to provide that level of skills, because what we don't want to do is significantly increase our costs and reduce what is often local SMEs' abilities to bid. So we will have bidder days and bidder events where we'll talk this through, and then we'll have certain things within the proposals or the documents that go out, which will then be brought into our scoring. And again, that's a general answer as opposed to how this procurement will be led, because we're just moving forward with that.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any other indications. So I think we are asked to note this content, the content of this report. And I think we are just done that. Excellent. Right. So now we'll move on to agenda item number 8. It's the 2026 to 29 business plan and budget as it relates to this committee. Can I ask Michael Hudson, Executive Director of Finance and Resources, to present this report, which is on page 95 of your agenda pack?
Thank you, Chair. To members that sit on more than this committee, I apologise, because you'll hear from me several times on this matter over the coming 2 weeks. And so my introduction probably won't be much different in any of those, so you can fall asleep in the other meetings. Clearly noting the recommendations first on page 95, the committee is here to consider and scrutinise the proposals. Set that out in the training that was provided to councillors earlier on this month. And it's key to note that at the end of the discussion, I will summarise back to the committee what I think is the thrust of the debate or any proposals to strategy, resources and performance, because at that committee we will be giving the feedback from all of the committees. The report, as it stands for this and for other committees, is split into 3 main parts. Part 1 and Part 2 cover the overall county council position, both on the strategic framework and the budget overall. This will be something that Strategy, Resources and Performance as a collective will then consider and make recommendations to council, and council will then debate as a whole on the 10th of February. The budget will be updated for Strategy, Resources and Performance, and I am able to say that I'm confident that the £6.4 million gap that was identified in the December report will be closed as a result of the provisional settlement announcement, although we are still working through the complex and the detail that was issued very late by MHCLG. The SRP papers also include within that the capital programme overall. That's 146.5 million, 750 million in total over a 10-year period. And that sets out the overall capital requirements, both in terms of borrowing and the revenue consequences of that borrowing, some of which you then see through the papers that are before you, including the offset of things such as capital receipts to reduce our borrowing. So the main focus is actually on part 3 for this committee, and that starts at page 104. Table 3.1, I would just draw councillors' attention to the fact that that is the full Finance and Resources Directorate, and therefore some of the services such as finance, customer and digital services, and to some extent investment activity are items that are considered by Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee. Within table 3, at Appendix 1, and as is started to be discussed at section 3.4, the main areas of saving within the asset and procurement purview relate to the buildings rationalisation, as well as then some procurement and property management savings. You can see a list of the key areas of investment and savings at table 3.4. And then, as I say, and that's on page 106. And then, as I say, the detail is in appendix at table 3. Finally, table 3.5, which is appendix tables 4 and 5, set out the capital programme for the asset procurement areas. Again, the main focus of that is property alongside digital contracts. And finally, then, councillors will see at appendix 2, we have the fees and charges schedule that starts at page 129. I would just note that the Castle Street parking charges that are mentioned within the main body of the text are actually within the Highways and Transport Committee, and that's why they're not shown on those appendices. But happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Right. Any questions from anyone? Councillor Batchelor.
Not a question, but more just a comment from my end. So I just wanted to add my support for the thrust to essentially dispose of the council's assets that are deemed to be unviable. I know we've already had one item on our agenda today for that, and I see in our 4 plan we have more coming up. So I think that's a very sensible way to approach the budget in a time when we need to save money. So yeah, just wanted to say I'm very supportive of that particular sort of method of rationalising our assets, and obviously we've got LGR coming up as well, so I think that could be another opportunity to do more of that. So yeah, I'd sort of say I'm supportive of that, and of the item as a whole. So I will be supporting what we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moschini.
Hello. Just 2 very quick points. Number 1, I think sometimes, and again, this is not so much me trying to teach anyone to suck eggs, but sometimes, especially in a committee like this, we don't have committees that are specifically the same committee. We don't have one committee per directorate. So sometimes the discussions that we have here are not in these tables. For example, to those interested in expenditure related to net zero schemes and stuff like that, a lot of it is in place in sustainability, which I suspect half of it is going to go to highways and the other half is going to go to environment. And for those who are interested but aren't on those committees, such as myself, SNR is the place to go. So it's probably better if those questions go to those committees. However, it is to be noted that sometimes we discuss things in separate places. In terms of this particular committee and the stuff that we just talked about, we have, just following on very helpfully from what Henry was just saying, we have a few sort of property disposals ongoing. Some of them have been ongoing for quite a while, she says very carefully. And I was wondering if Michael would do us the favor of explicitly explaining how these are considered in the capital program. Are we baking into the budget anything relating to being able to sell that stuff, even though some of them are proving slightly tricky?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the main body of the report, I do reference the need for capital receipts linked to the asset rationalisation programme. And councillors will see at page 126 there is an assumption over the coming years of £32.5 million worth of capital receipts that are not earmarked for any other purposes, and are therefore being set aside against treasury management, and therefore you will see that we have made some assumptions around the disposal of our assets in the coming years. Going back to the earlier point, I absolutely recognise that in a number of instances, issues cut across, such as carbon between EG&I, transport, this committee, and again, if there are comments going back to the conversation we had before, again, I'll try and capture those to feed into SRMP, just as we will through EG&I and other committees where they're raised.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Bywater and then Councillor Arnaides.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Michael and all the team, I know you put a lot of hard work into this report, so thank you. But I've got a couple of questions, really. I'll start with the first. So given the current slowdown in the commercial property market and the acknowledged slippage to the assets change programme we've seen arising from local government reorganisation considerations, what assurances can the committee have that the council's targets to deliver over 1 million of revenue savings and 5 million of capital receipts by March 2027 remain realistic and achievable? And in particular, how is the Directorate going to stress test its assumptions around the property disposals and income generation while simultaneously managing increased procurement and utility costs, safeguarding service delivery and staff wellbeing, ensuring value for money, and maintaining the council's ambition around carbon reduction? I've got a second question, but it's not related to that.
Michael.
Sorry, I've managed to break my glasses during this session. So trying to maneuver and work through. So I think I'm reading right. Yes, it's a really good question, and something that as Section 151 officer for all of the service areas, I'm constantly challenging. So also challenging my own team and myself within this one. And actually, if I refer councillors to table 3.2 at page 105, you'll see that actually the asset change programme has actually experienced a period of slippage. Now, at the point in time when that was set, there was an element of realism that was undertaken that did not perceive local government reorganisation. So the unknown was what struck us in terms of that. So we paused the programme whilst we looked at the position and what that might do. So what you see in table 3.2 and then table 3.3 is a revised version of the asset change programme, which now means that an awful lot of that work is backloaded. Now, in one sense, that's not good news, because what it's meant is we've had to find alternative savings. That is what we've done. We've reported that through the SRMP committee, and that has meant that the officers have worked hard on arrangements that have flown through into other savings that you see here, such as cleaning. The other side of that is it does mean that we have a significant period where we have been working on the estate in terms of some of the assumptions. So we have soft market tested some of the areas. We have held discussions with staff, colleagues, trade unions. We have looked at relocation and the ability to operate. And in some cases, we have actually mothballed a number of buildings. So when we brought forward these proposals, and as you see at table 3.3, forms the majority of that, you'll notice that in a couple of those, they are firstly part year. And secondly, they're also net of relocation, because one of the things that we identified from the early change program is that we didn't want to be over optimistic in terms of some of that. We are aware in some cases, for example, we need redesignated planning permission to move people into relocation. So the team has worked through with that. Clearly, there could still be slippages within all of this. We often do find that there are issues within that. That's something that the team are aware of and will look to manage throughout the year. Will clearly be monitored on this through the integrated financial monitoring reports that are brought to a committee. But as it stands at this moment, I think the majority of those assets are deliverable within the year. So if I look, for example, at Lawrence Court, which is where our coroners are, we are presently relocating them to another building that they were temporarily relocated to whilst all the work was going on at Peterborough City Council, and we've decided to move them into as a long-term basis. So we know that Lawrence Court, for example, will become vacant very shortly before the start of the financial year, and we also know that it is a valuable asset in the area that it's located. Whereas there are others, such as Hereward Hall, where we are still working through a number of that. So you'll see that that is a significantly reduced. That will not happen on the 1st of April as opposed to some of the other moves that are happening. So we have a work plan schedule for each of those, and we will continue to monitor that. And if and when issues crop up, we will look to bring updates to committee and find mitigating savings. And quite happy to continue that conversation outside in terms of some of the confidentiality of that.
Thank you very much, Michael. My second question relates to the council's saving forecast, in particular maintenance contract of 300 grand, which assumes a reduction in planned and reactive maintenance to base essentials without compromising statutory testing and compliance. Given that I can see no explicit commentary or contingency for increased maintenance costs and life cycle costs associated with ground source heat pumps, for example, because we know that they're more expensive to maintain than the gas heat pumps. And I know that from my conversations with Mr. Finch, I think it is. Can the director explain how this saving remains achievable? In particular, how does reducing maintenance activity align with operational and reliability requirements of ground source heat pumps? And what assurance can be given that this does not introduce additional financial burdens or service risk in year costs, really?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I can't start by saying anything other than it is a risk. It is a risk we are aware of going into this. We've stated that safety and compliance work will not be stopped within that. Clearly, part of compliance is the heat of a building. And therefore, if and when such work is required, we would have a consideration that would be needed in terms of what was the intention to that building, which is my way of saying that if a building had a very short life within the overall scale, we may not be able to afford to continue that building running, and we would need to take action to relocate. We do have condition surveys on all of our boilers, and there has been regular maintenance on those, and that wouldn't be stopped. However, we do have an aged estate. This is one of our newer buildings that we sit in, but across the council we do have a estate that is coming towards its end of life, and you know, that aren't on the list that you see at table 3.3. So they will require difficult conversations to be had at that point in time. We do have a capital program of 2.1 million, which is also set out in the appendices, I think about page 125, that can be drawn down on. And clearly we will look to prioritise that throughout the year. It could be, therefore, that we either end up in a situation that we're having to mitigate through other actions, or we're taking actions to reduce the estate by closing part of a building or closing a building and relocating. But at this moment in time, that is something, given the financial constraints that all local authorities find themselves within, we've got to, in terms of having to balance our budget.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just putting it out there that obviously I've got serious concerns about this savings target, and ultimately, it reflects on health and safety of our staff and people working with our buildings.
Point well made. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're not signing off on the entire 26 to 29 budget, but we are scrutinising the parts that fall under the assets and procurement. So there are elements here that I can support, such as using capital receipts to reduce borrowing. I think that's an absolutely right approach. I think residents, they want to see debt coming down. They don't want to see the estate used as a piggy bank for more initiatives, I don't think. And I also welcome the move to full cost recovery on workplace EV charging. I don't think that's been mentioned as of yet, as it's not fair, I think, on non-EV owners to subsidise charging costs for those who can afford electric vehicles. So I really do welcome that. I think that's good. That's good work here. However, in the broader picture, I think it's a little bit more troubling. I think we're still staring at a funding gap of around 40 million. I think, although I believe we've been assured that this will be closed. However, at present, what we're given is a strategic framework full of objectives. Healthy, fair, sustainable, green, inclusive. But what I don't see is a matching table that says, look, this is how this is, what it will cost residents. Here is what we'll stop doing in order to pay for it. So at the same time, I see those ambitions filtering into other documents like the land and property strategy, in ways that embed net zero and other agendas without sort of transparent upfront costings. So I'm not sure exactly this delivers value for money for the council. So as a result, therefore, I won't be giving this business plan my endorsement from an assets and procurement committee's perspective. However, I do welcome the good, especially the debt reduction and genuine efficiency. But I think I'm going to reserve my overall position until I see a budget that closes the gap through cutting waste and slimming the state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any Councillor Hathorn?
So I guess I'd like to comment in response to that comment, Chair, that this budget process like it's post-Christmas, and it literally feels like we've picked everything off the turkey and we're down to the skeleton, and every year we're asked, can you pick some more off? And we are really down to the bones, but we do always seem to be able to get a bit closer. The most of the money in this council, which I know is beyond this committee, goes towards statutory services. It goes to supporting vulnerable adults, vulnerable children, the special educational needs, although that's ring fenced, there's a whole lot of interest costs. There is not a lot of spare cash in this council. And there is, the notion that this committee could make savings, which would make a massive financial difference, or there's massive waste in this committee, is absolutely it's just an utter misrepresentation of what is going on. This is a committee, we're looking at the county council assets. These are our buildings and whatever, and how can we run them more efficiently? And sometimes that is cutting things that we really don't want to. Ideally we don't cut the maintenance further, but we've now got a strategy, we've got a register of what we've got, we know what we've got a policy. So now we can look at that policy and go, if we have to cut this because we really can't find the money. And the reason why the county council has these financial issues is because we have statutory services which we cannot control. We cannot control how many vulnerable adults or how many adults need our support, our social services support. We cannot control the big spends are outside our control. We have to respond to them, and that is why there continues to be financial pressures on local government. So, this is not a budget which can miraculously solve the council's financial, problems and challenges. Yes, I think paying off the county council's debt, so we are spending less money servicing their debt, that is a brilliant approach. But these debts have been allowed to build up over an extremely long time, and some of them with business investments, which frankly do not look so brilliant at this point in time. But yeah, I think it is, I know how difficult this budget setting process has been. This is it's a sensible budget. The property reduction strategy is very sensible. If you've got buildings which aren't being used, sell them off and use the money from those buildings to reinvest, to reduce the amount of debt you've got, to then reduce the interest the money you are spending on interest. So I'd just like to say, I do support this budget. I think it's been really, really difficult to get to this place. I support the kind of process, the theoretical and strategic approach going on. And I will be voting in support of it. But I recognise, it's a political document. But we are not signing a blank cheque for net zero, because we cannot possibly write a blank cheque. This is a county council that has a load of statutory requirements and has to create a balanced budget. So let's not pretend any blank cheques are being written. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hathorn. Any other comments? Okay, so Michael, perhaps you could summarise the notes from the discussion and let us know, if you can, what feedback you'll be giving to the Strategy and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm now in the unenviable position of being able to see from this distance, but I'm hoping the microphone works. These are comments that we would feed back to Strategy, Resources and Performance. So if there is any inaccuracies in that, please do come back. So I've noted that councillors were generally supportive of asset rationalisation and using receipts to manage our borrowing, and thus recognising the importance of capital receipts. There was challenge to the assumptions, therefore, around the assurance of delivering revenue and capital savings from the change programme, with councillors recognising that needed to be monitored closely throughout the coming financial year. There was also challenge in relation to the maintenance savings, particularly the desire to ensure that colleagues across the organisation remained safe in compliant buildings, and that was prioritised, and that needed to be also monitored throughout the full year. And finally, there was also support for the full cost charging for electric vehicles.
Thank you, Michael. Does anyone not agree with that? Yep, no, okay, great. So let's move on to the recommendations. We are asked to consider and scrutinise proposals relevant to this committee within the 2026-29 business plan and budget put forward by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee on the 11th of December 2025. And B, recommend changes and or actions for consideration by the Strategy, Resources and Performance Committee at its meeting on the 29th of January 2026 to enable a business plan and budget to be proposed to full council on 10th February 2026. And lastly, C, receive the fees and charges schedule for this committee included at Appendix 2. So I think we'll take a vote again. All those in favour? And all those against? And I think that's everyone again. So no abstentions. And that motion is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Right, then the final item is agenda item number 9, the agenda plan, training plan and appointments. Would the Democratic Services Officer update us on any changes to the published report?
Thank you, Chair. There are no updates to the report on the published agenda plan, but I would just bring members' attention to the new dates for the CBC training sessions later this month, where invites have been sent out. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone have any comments? Councillor Meschini.
I have a question, well, two things. Number one, in terms of the special meeting that's on the plan for the 5th of February, I was wondering if we could get a summary of what we expect to be discussing. It just says confidential report. So if you could remind us what that's about. And the next question is, in terms of the 11th of March, are we still expecting Hawthorns and Mill Road to come?
What did you say that you still expect?
So in respect to the 11th of March, which is not the special, just a normal committee meeting, it currently says Hawthorns and the Mill Road Library both are coming in March. Is that still the expectation?
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the 5th of February meeting, I can confirm that that is in relation to appointment of developer for Cambridge Biomedical Campus. There will be a public report as well as confidential appendices for that paper, and it will be a single agenda item. Unfortunately, we didn't get full sign-off of legals before the deadline for this meeting, but councillors will be well aware of the site over a number of years, and there will be further briefings for councillors in advance of that meeting. In relation to the March meeting, I can confirm that Mill Road will not be coming to the committee, as we are still working well with the community groups in relation to that asset. In relation to Hawthorns, I will need to just check with the property team as to the state of play of that one.
Thank you. If I could just check, because I have a queue of people interested in that committee, depending on, you know, who's the local member for what and when it comes, because obviously my colleague Richard, very interested in Mill Road, and Hawthorns is in my division. If as soon as you know, if you can let me know so I can work out whether or not I want to be subbed and all the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Maybe I can just
Go on, yep.
Yeah, if I can just come back. It is very clear in the member officer protocol to engage with the local members in the preparation of reports, so we will absolutely do that, and I'm sure that Councillor Howitt and Councillor Green also will be discussing with us in the coming months anyway.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Right, so we are asked to note the agenda plan. And that is then the final item on today's agenda. Our next meeting is on the 5th of February at 10 a.m. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone.